policies on consent of adolescents to access sexual and reproductive health care, which acts as a barrier to access and needs harmonizing, since it does not recognize mature minors or emancipated minors to be a part of the conversation. Friends, that's the conversation we're going to be having today on how best we can make sure that everyone, especially adolescents and the young matures, have access to this. And the theme to this conversation is the sexual and reproductive health and rights in the uncertain times. With me to have this conversation in the room where we are, in the skies, we have the Minister of Health. Let's give a round of applause to the Minister of Health, ladies and gentlemen. We have Serhat with us as well. Serhat Uganda. Let's clap for them. We have peer-to-peer. They're here with us. We have Foundation of Male Engagement. This is a good one for this engagement. We have Population Services International, PSI. Women's Link Worldwide. Salvation Family Foundation Uganda. We have HEPS Uganda. We have IPAS and AGA. Those are part of those in the coalition we are having, plus other individual partners who are with us in the room. You are part of this conversation and we want to welcome you today. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, allow me to welcome my panelists to join me up here that we can have the conversation. Let me welcome Dr. Robert Mutumba. He happens to be the Principal Medical Officer, Reproductive and Infant Health Division from the Ministry of Health. Let's clap for Dr. Mutumba as he makes his way here. Dr. Mutumba. In the same vein, allow me to welcome Reverend, this is Reverend Mugalu Nathan from the foundation, from the Salvation Family Foundation Uganda. This one is one of the clerics we have in the room. We have Honorable Ayebale Margaret, who will be joining us soon. And we have Rose Wachkona, who will equally join us for this conversation. Round of applause for Honorable. This one is a Senior Attorney, Women's Link Worldwide. Friends, as we're waiting for the other Honorable to come, maybe she's held up by a couple of competing priorities. Let's start the conversation from here. Just to confirm that I'm having all my panelists and they can all speak. Good morning, Dr. Mugalu. Dr. Mutumba. Can you hear me? Let me request the tech team to help with the mics. You good? Okay. Good morning, Dr. Mutumba.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Good morning, Reverend Nathan Mugalu.
Good morning.
Okay. Good morning, Honorable. Rather Council. Rose Wachkona. You never know you're getting to Parliament.
Take that as a prophecy.
Very much so. Honorable Margaret Ayebare is finally here. Good to see you.
To see you too.
Okay, Rose, the audience on the other side needs to confirm that you're live and clear. Kindly put on the mic there. Reverend can help you in how he did it. You see, this is the male engagement. This is what we need. The tech team could possibly come through. Good to have you. Let me request Honorable Ayebare, please, you're going to rest from here. But let's clap for her. Finally, she made her way here. We really want to thank you, Honorable, for coming through.
Yes, welcome.
Now that we have the panelists all here with us, friends, you're going to allow me to start this conversation. And I'm going to start this conversation by God's design. Somehow we have women at both ends and we have the males in the middle. But I'm going to start off with Rose. Rose, where you are, is your mic on? Okay, let me start with Reverend Nathan Mugalu as you're waiting for the others to actually get through. Reverend, from a religious perspective, what is the role of leaders, religious leaders, in reducing maternal mortality and promoting access to SRHR. That is something you need to think about. As and when we're fixing this, you're going to be coming through. Friends, allow me to first have the keynote address to give us the perspective on how this is going to run. From this keynote address, it will guide us on how critical this conversation is and how urgent we need to act. Friends, allow me to welcome Dr. Othniel Musana, the President, Association of the Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Uganda. Round of applause as he comes.
Thank you very much, the Honorable MP, Woman MP, Honorable Ayebare. Good to see you again. Reverend Palirana, nice to meet you. Rose Achikona and Dr. Mutumba from the Ministry of Health. I am Othniel Musana, a doctor by profession, a gynecologist, usually treating cancers. I'm also the president of Association of Obstetricians in Uganda, and I think I'll hold that position until next year when I hand over. I'm also a father of 3 daughters at the moment. Also a teacher. Offering specialized services. I'm also the overseas editor for the Indian Journal of Gynecology, which is the journal that looks at cancer care in India and all over the world. I have no conflict of interest to disclose. This is my work and my perceptions and how I assess the issues before me. Topic, and I think, I hope I do justice and also provide the information that will not only provoke thoughts but also provoke action. I would ask the team manning that to move on. The next slide, please. So AOGU is having a conference and the theme is securing the reproductive health future of women in Uganda. It doesn't come from the president's thing of securing the future of Uganda, but it is securing reproductive health future. And of importance in that theme is something that we've neglected as obstetricians, I think, and as a country and as a community. And that conversation is around adolescent and teenage pregnancies, which is a very big issue, and it has sort of remained in the arena without adequate discussion. Next one. The more I assess this issue, I assess it from that perspective. When you see some of the pictures there, I'm a Christian, and the more I thought about this issue, the more I thought about the way we deal with adolescents and teenagers when they get pregnant. Most of the time we are stoning them. We are stoning the woman, stoning the girl, without actually providing solutions or empathy or help for these women. So, when we are faced with adolescents, what we normally see as doctors is that we are managing them from issues of complications. Adolescents are among the individuals or teenagers with pregnancies are among those who die because of delivery. And most teenagers between the age of 15, the most common cause of death is actually pregnancy related. So if you're 15 to 19 and you're pregnant, you likely die from pregnancy as compared to anything else. Then of course, in countries like Uganda, until I think recently, the policy was keep them out of school. And I think some schools are still enforcing keep them out of school. Then of course they have issues like obstetric fistula. They are still growing and their bodies are not yet ready for the role they have been put into, which is motherhood. Then of course preterm birth and stillbirth. Many of them lose their babies. However, also there is a big problem with this age group because many of their pregnancies are unintended. And therefore, the biggest chunk of them will end up in unsafe abortion or attempts to actually terminate the pregnancy with whatever means. If they don't attempt, then their families or the partners will force them to terminate that pregnancy. So an abortion becomes a big challenge here. I'll talk about the definitions. Sexual reproductive health and rights. So this is a state of complete physical, emotional, mental, and social well-being. Not just absence of disease or dysfunction. So when we talk about sexual and reproductive health rights for these adolescents, they must be emotionally well, mentally well, socially well, not just treating medical complications. And an adolescent, in the medical terms, as defined by WHO, is somebody who is between the ages of 10 to 19. Now, this phase is very important. And this is a phase between childhood and adulthood. They're not children, they're not small adults. They are transitioning into a new phase of life. And if poorly managed, this is the phase where patterns of behavior are established that may affect both their current health, but also future health. So this phase is very chaotic, and if not well managed, leads to complications in health. Then there is the concept of young people. This is somewhere between 10 and 24 years as medical practitioners. That's what we use. Now, there is something called adolescent fertility rate. Many of these adolescents are actually contributing to the pool of babies born in Uganda. And this is the number of births out of every 1,000 women aged 15 to 19. So you'll hear these terms over and over again. Adolescent fertility rate. What does it actually mean? Why focus on adolescents? So worldwide, for them to grow and develop, they need to have information. So age-appropriate and comprehensive sexuality education. This has raised problems in this country. What is age-appropriate? And who defines age-appropriate? Is it the culture? Is it the religion? Is it the state? They must have opportunities to develop skills because many of them are actually engaged in the workforce at some point. And many of them get pregnant because of them working. Then for us on the health sector, a lot of our biases make the services unacceptable, unequitable, inappropriate, and ineffective for them when they access. So the health workers, we have a role to actually help these women or young women. Then of course they need supportive and safe environments. When they come to the communities, we beat them up, unsafe. When they come to hospital, we beat them up. When they go to the courts of law, same thing. When they go to the police, same thing. So none of them are actually safe, and we must make safe environments. But also one important thing is that I have not had a program where adolescents, especially in policy making, where they're actually involved in decisions for their care and their well-being. Many of them are imposed from our perspective as adults. So, that is my holy grail for where I come from. We are always throwing stones, stone the girl, stone the woman, stone. So, most of this stoning is coming, one, from our social, cultural, and religious beliefs. In terms of our culture, this is an abomination. And I know some culture used to throw them over something and kill them. Yes. From our religious perspective, we want to also condemn them. Poor access to information. So I am a doctor, but I also know that my nurses and even doctors don't have information about sexuality. They're also depending on their social and cultural beliefs to define sexuality. Then we have sometimes restrictive laws and policies, and also provider biases and lack of confidentiality. So if someone tells me I'm having sex and I am 15, the first thing I'll do is call the parent and say, hey, your girl, you know, come and rescue. So that lack of confidentiality and bias also affects us as a barrier for them to actually thrive. Then limited information. They are getting info from everywhere, the media, social media, parents, colleagues, peer pressures, and a lot of this is wrong information. So they have access to limited information. And of course, parental and partner control. In Uganda, many of the girls who are pregnant are actually living with a partner. So they are controlled by that partner. And that may lead to violence. IPV. Now, when they come to see Dr. Musan and the colleagues in this room, our services are expensive. I live in Kampala, I think has about 12 universities, and many of those girls are around 18, 19. They cannot access even simple services in the hospitals. So access becomes unaffordable for them. So let me go now to the information, the real basic data that is actually bringing the problem. As I said, the more things change in Uganda, the more things remain the same. So it means we are doing something that is not effective to change what happens to this population of people. So the age of first sexual contact. If you look at the UBOS data, UDHS, if you compare women and men, nothing has changed. More girls are sexually active by the age of 15, which is almost twice the number as boys, the same age. And this number has not changed much over the years. In the last 2016, about 20% of the girls at the age of 15 have had sex before. When they make 18, legally they are now adults, but they are still adolescents or teenagers. Still nothing has changed. Economy has grown, more in school, UPE has come, USC has come, they are more in university, but nothing has changed. So by the age of 18, more than 64% of them are actually having sex or have had sex. If you look at the boys, less than 50%. So is there a problem with the girls or is there a problem with the boys? So much as we are targeting intervention towards the girls, they are still having the sex. So the problem is here to step likely. If you look at the age of first marriage, over the last close to 30 years from 1988, 30-something years now, nothing much has changed. By the age of 15, as of 2016, 13 out of 100 girls, that is about 1 in 10, who are 15 or less, are actually married or living with a partner. By the time they are 18, 42 out of every 100 girls between the ages of adolescent girls below the ages of 19 are actually married. So 4 in 10. So if you count 10 girls, 4 of them are married, wherever you are in the country. So nothing has changed since 1988. Now if you look at fertility, this is a group which is contributing very well to our fertility rate. In Uganda, their pregnancies are significant in Uganda, despite the increase in interventions targeting ending teenage pregnancies. Now, between 1988, where it was 193 per 1,000, so out of every 1,000 girls, 193 would become pregnant. In 1998, that number has not changed much in 2016. So out of every 1,000 girls, 134 will become pregnant as teenagers. It means there is a problem. There is a big problem in this country. Of course, when you have sex, one of the most feared complications is HIV and STIs. And in Uganda, in 2004, the surveys done by UBOS showed that 4.3% of the girls who were sexually active between the ages of 15 and 24 actually had HIV. If you compare that to the boys, at 1%, that is 4 times that likely that a girl will have HIV at that time, 2004. If you look at it, 2011, when this last survey was done, 5% of the girls between that age group were actually HIV positive. So it actually went up, not down. Okay? And the boys, less than half of that number, of that percentages. So HIV remains a big problem in these young women, in our future mothers and the rest. Now, of course, as I've said, pregnancy and its complications remain the biggest killer for girls or for adolescents between the ages of 15 and 19. They won't die of malaria, they won't die of this, they will die of pregnancy as the #1 killer. So it is of utmost importance that actually we intervene to reduce these deaths. The other problem we are finding is abortion. They are adolescents. None of them is planning to actually conceive. Very few of them actually have a planned pregnancy. Most of them are unintended pregnancies. So their solutions lie in terminating the pregnancy. And one of the consequences is abortion, of course. And many of them, because they don't have access, because they don't have information, because there's IPV, whatever they're coming from, they will tend to look for unsafe methods of abortion. And this will kill many of them. So the reasons are many. They want to delay birth, they have bad economic situations, troubled partners, and some other reasons. So if you look at deaths in Uganda, women who died in 2019 and 2021, 11% of the women who died because of pregnancy were less than 19 years in 2020. That number increased slightly to 12% in the last year. So they are providing a significant proportion of, so basically 1 in 10 of the mothers who die is actually a teenage mother. So let's speak about teenage pregnancy really. So these are girls aged between 10 and 19 who are either pregnant or who have given birth. That's the way we define it medically. They are either pregnant currently or they have given birth. So in Uganda, 3 in 5 women aged 20 and above, reproductive age life, began childbearing as teenagers. So 60% of the women, even in this room, likely began childbearing before they made 20. Teenage pregnancy rate reduced from 44% in 1995, and it dropped significantly by 20%, 2006. But since then, nothing has changed. So have we reached a ceiling that we cannot reduce this rate further to about 10%? So the last 15, 20 years, it has remained the same. So 20% of the girls are actually already married or living with a man for some reason. And when they deliver, the babies will likely die compared to an older woman. So they are having just tragedy after tragedy. So when they assess the district, the DHIS2, which is our Ministry Information System, there were 31,000 pregnancies in 2021 monthly average. Monthly, not yearly. Monthly, 31,000 pregnancies. This translates to 1,000 pregnancies daily of teenagers between the ages of 15 and 19. It means as we speak, with each passing minute, 44 girls are getting pregnant. So as we keep counting the minutes in this room, there are 44 girls getting pregnant each hour. Almost one girl per second. Almost. So there are problems in this country that we must address. So there is something in the theme which said uncertain times. And I believe that adolescents find themselves in a period of uncertainty beyond their control, really. Most of it is caused by people like me, the men who have sex with them, policies that we have in this country or in the homes, attitudes towards adolescent sex and pregnancy, actions by adults beyond the control. abortion, etc. Because these are actually happening. So they are having sex, so there must be strategies to reduce the harms of sex. They are having unsafe abortions, what happens? They are dying when they come as pregnant women, what happens? How do we actually reduce the harm done to them? Let me talk about harm reduction. This is a model we are adopting as AOGU and championing on other issues like unsafe abortion. So harm reduction first of all, I think we must accept that the problem is here. Teenage pregnancy is part of our society from time immemorial, because we used to marry young girls off at 12, 13. Now they're not getting married as much, but they're still having marriages or living with partners. So we should choose to develop solutions that minimize the harmful effects, rather than simply ignoring or wishing it away. We must have solutions to minimize and reduce condemnation of these teenagers. Then we need to understand that teenage pregnancy is not when I'm in my office seeing teenage mothers, she will tell you, that guy pays my school fees. I have no parents. So do I report to the police? Do I, there are issues that we need to understand that this is a complex issue and not one solution will work for all. So one of the things we advocate for is modifying some behaviors other than total condemnation. Because, for example, I cannot pay her fees. But those challenges exist. Then, of course, we need to promote, as health workers especially, but even social workers and other people, non-judgmental and non-coercive provision of services. And for the policymakers or the resource allocators like the parliamentarians, allocate resources to help these sexually active, HIV positive and pregnant adolescents, to assist them in reducing harm. Then where possible, have solutions where adolescents themselves or teenage mothers have a voice and input into the programs and the policies that affect, other than us putting things on to just designing services for them without actually consulting some of those real life stories, because they have stories behind them. So, but also I think one of the issues has been, whether it's in the church, whether it's in, I was in somewhere talking to people like me who are hardcore religious people, and they told me, no, those are demons, just cast them out. But that was their perspective. They know there's a problem, but they are saying there is something wrong spiritually, which may be, but the problem is being minimized in some of those areas. When you come to the medics, there's no problem. Most of the women dying are those old women who are 40 coming to deliver. So we're trying to minimize a problem, and this causes harm. Then of course there's been some effort to reduce the harm, possibly by pressure and also by people rethinking. And I know there is a sexuality action framework. I had a chance to read this and I felt there's something missing. And then of course there is the revised guidelines for the prevention of teenage pregnancy in schools, in the school setting. However, because I manage teenagers, when you send them to school with a positive test, it is trouble. It is trouble. Then, primary prevention. I was in Rwanda a few months back, early Feb, and of course, those of us who are talking about abortion. There is an issue with primary prevention of abortion. And there is a contention around abstinence. So primary prevention means that before they start becoming sexually active. Now, what we found out in some research was that if you go to the universities, 50% of the girls have not had sex before. And many of them quote religious beliefs or morality or something. The other 50 have had sex. So it's half-half. So discouraging earlier onset of sexual behavior is an important intervention, especially with abstinence. But abstinence does not prevent pregnancy. That should be the key message. Abstinence delays the onset of sex. It may be primary abstinence where you've never had sex, or it may be a secondary form of abstinence. I say I will not have sex for 2 years. The challenge with the abstinence-only programs has been that during the time they are abstaining,
what are the messages you're feeding them to empower them? That when they have that opportunity or they have the threat of having the sex, how can they make informed choices? How can they flee from such situations? Or how can they have safe sex? So those three things. So abstinence never prevents pregnancy. It delays the inevitable. So in that time they're abstaining, what are you doing to empower this woman or this young girl? So, so sex education, keeping them in school are actually important interventions to help them make informed choices. Then of course secondary prevention. These are girls who are already having sex. Remember the 50-50. Now the challenge was that research was done among girls who were in school, not girls who are out of school. So adolescents already engaging in sexual behavior, some of it is risky, and now they're experimenting a lot more. So part of it has to be to encourage the adolescent to reduce or stop the behavior. Recently I was seeing this video of a young girl on, I think, social media, I think S2, she looked like 14, and I was saying, you must have seen that video. And I'm like, there must have been something to intervene to help that girl. Otherwise she'll get either HIV or she'll come back pregnant. Okay? Then we need to provide information and education on contraception, condom use, STIs. STIs are still a problem for these young girls. HIV prevention and screening. We must empower them with information. In our field, we sometimes give them emergency contraception. They've come, have had sex, have been raped. Many of them have been raped, by the way, either by relatives or by main parties. So you come, you have to provide them with it. Then of course you have to educate them on safer sex, where it is difficult to stop the sexual activity at the time. Now, I'll still end with the same message. The more things seem to change, the more things remain the same. The problem is going to exist. It may not go away. So how do we reduce the harm associated with that problem? Thank you.
I would rather suggest that we give Dr. a much more round of applause.
These numbers are worrying. To those who are following online, I've seen someone here on Facebook, and she made a comment which was pertinent to say that this is Sifo Nero from South Africa. She says these figures are worrying, and indeed as a countryman I'm worried as well. These figures are worrying. 15, by the age of 18 they had their first sexual engagement at 15 years, and having 4 girls in 10 married, and that has not changed. And I loved what Doctor, you said, that abstinence does not mean we are not engaging. We are still engaging, we're just delaying. But what are we giving to have this kind of delay reasoning that is scientific and rather within the right framework? Friends, the ones who are watching on the other side of NTV, we're just going to take a short break on that side, and back here we're going to have a short clip that is going to play to bring us to speed and bring the conversation of Dr. Musana into context.
Not a strong person, doctor, I would be worried, extremely worried. But as a father, this worries me. As a male champion, this worries me. And as a youth leader, this worries me. And I want to start off from the church, because Dr. Musana said in the religious domain, they say these are demons that need to be casted out. And in some other domains, they say, no, don't worry about it. Even the medical practice. I want to start off with Reverend Nathan from Family Salvation Foundation. What is the role of the religious leaders in reducing maternal mortality and promoting access to SRHR services across the country?
Thank you, dear Andrew, and dear viewers.
Reverend Nathan Mugalu here, Executive Director, Family Salvation Foundation, Uganda, but also the President of the International Religio-Cultural Forum on Health. Yes, statistics are too worrying, and these realities are actually jeopardizing the development and transformation of our communities. Now, in most cases, when we speak about religion and culture, I've always maintained it that Africans are notoriously religious. In a way, they have something that they believe in, and in this case, this is the church. These are faith-based institutions. Now, the job of ending maternal deaths and making sure that we provide a good future for the health of women in this country will take a lot of roles and responsibilities. Number one, most of these unintended pregnancies in our communities, even in Kampala Metropolitan here, most of them are promoted by the negative social gender norms. Negative social gender norms that promote vulnerability of women and girls, but also that promote vulnerability of the general population in this country. Therefore, as religious institutions, it is their job, first of all, to speak against these negative gender social norms that in the end promote harmful practices against our young girls and women in this country. Then the other issue is definitely religious institutions are in charge of the family. Dear viewers, you'll bear me witness that teenage pregnancies that were witnessed during the COVID-19 breakdown pointed to the fact that we are living in a society with broken family systems, where homes are no longer safe havens for the thriving of children. We have had cases of incest in families. We have had cases, much as these may not end in teenage pregnancies, but we've had cases where even young boys, the police crime report stated it very clearly, having over 300 reported cases of young boys that were molested in families. So religious institutions have a role to play in promoting these family values so that children are protected and safeguarded in their families. Because families, these are where children live. These are where young girls live. Most of these teenage pregnancies happen either in homes or they happen due to failure of families to respond to the needs and wants of these children. Therefore, that one is our role. The other issue is information. Age-appropriate, sensitive information, whereby this information will empower our people to make informed decisions. Unfortunately, if families, for instance, if families are not speaking, if religious institutions are not giving information, if cultural institutions are not giving information, these are custodians of morality and values in our communities. Other people are speaking. So the culture of silence, deliberate silence, has landed us into problems. Because even if we do not speak, our children are picking wrong information from other sources. They are picking information from their peers. They are picking information from the internet. They are picking information from social media. And remember, as people with authority, the social community goalkeepers, we have a right to first refusal. Therefore, silence and an assumption that nothing is happening is very dangerous. The other issue is, after information, then the deliberate fight by religious institutions and personnel to fight against GBV. Majority of these teenage pregnancy cases, majority of these maternal deaths are a result of gender-based violence against girls and women. Some of the women that die during their pregnancy, some of them die because probably they were beaten. Probably they have been going through violence from their partners. Why? Because they are living in relationships that have no guidance, that have no morals, and have no values. We are seeing men battling pregnant girls. We are seeing men battling pregnant women. And at the end of the day, some of them die, some of them suffer abortions, some of them cannot deliver, or some of them suffer post-traumatic stress disorders because of this violence. Then the other issue is,
Reverend, before you leave there, you said that the church or the religious leaders are not addressing that, they're not coming out strongly to address the issue of GBV and these conversations with their congregations. So how do we engage them to bring them on board, that they can be a part of the conversation?
First of all, most of the religious personnel have always maintained this, that they are not going to give us what they do not have. You know that the phenomenon of gender-based violence, it changes on a daily basis. New forms of GBV come on board on a daily basis, new dynamics, new beliefs, but also other factors that further endanger and make women and young girls vulnerable to GBV. New ones come on board. Yes, for instance, if you talk about the young people in this country, some of our young girls are going through violence because of, for instance, the latest phones now, iPhones. I need an iPhone, so even if I'm going through violence, let me go through violence. It's better to cry when I have an iPhone than being excited with a capability. You get? But during our time, really a phone could not land somebody into maybe an abusive relationship or something. So we need to build the capacity of our people, first of all, to address the current trends. Number two, to appreciate the data and evidence that is available, because this should be evidence-based interventions. Then number three is coming up with a communication strategy. Already we have a communication strategy in place, but we need a more youth-friendly strategy that will break down the issues of violence to our people.
Thank you so much. That is what I wanted, a youth-friendly strategy. This brings me back to Senior Attorney of Women's Link Worldwide, that is Rose Wachikona. Rose, what is the current environment for the SRHR? I know the government prefers that I could go silent on the last hour, but these are times when we need to speak about these uncomfortable conversations. What is the terrain like from where you sit and stand?
Health and
Reverend?
Yeah, I think as a country, we have decided to fight an ideological war instead of programming for our people. Our data says one thing, but we are deciding to ignore the data and the evidence that exists in order to reinforce an ideological norm that the country has decided to take on. I'll give some examples. When you look at the policy space that Uganda is currently occupying, I'll throw around like the guidelines that address the reintegration of pregnant girls within schools. And these guidelines within themselves were hinted on by Dr. Othniel, but they state that as soon as you enter school, you're supposed to be subjected to a mandatory pregnancy test. And when you're found pregnant, you're supposed to be put on forced maternity leave for 1 whole year. Within that 1 year, a young girl has no access to education. This is reinforcing an ideological belief rather than programming for a current trend. And we take it that schools can't manage pregnant women. Oh, they are so delicate. I hear they are vulnerable, etc., etc. Again, when you go down to the National Sexuality Education Framework that we have currently adopted, as Dr. said, it is heavily abstinence-based, but it takes away knowledge on access to contraception. It doesn't address issues to do with the evolving capacities of minors, and it deals with them as if they are asexual beings. But our statistics are showing us that our teenagers are actually having sex. That means they are not asexual in any way. But we insist as a country in reinforcing an ideological norm that our teenagers are asexual. And we program as if they are not having sex instead of programming as if they are. This again extends to the out-of-school policy that is being adopted. But again, when you go down to our policies that address issues to do with adolescents, they don't deal with things like consent. they conflate marriage with sex because they assume that consent to marry means consent to have sex. But those are two completely different things. And that means that if you cannot consent to have sex, then you cannot consent to have sexual reproductive health services that are tagged towards sexual activity. So a minor will go into a hospital, but then they cannot be given contraceptives, they cannot be given information around sexuality, simply because the assumption is they are not having sex and therefore cannot consent to some of these health services. So our environment is that our government, as is, has decided to fight an ideological war instead of programming for our current reality.
Wow. Council, you're hitting so hard. If we're in church, you'd be clapped for, but given that we are in a forum for, thank you so much, because I love the word ideological war, rather programming, and we are assuming as a country that our teenagers are not engaged, but they're already indulging in sexual activities. And before I let you go, Council, what are some of the barriers, again, that are hindering this conversation or hindering the access to SRH services from the community?
I had hinted on some of them, but I think the biggest that we have is the laws and policies that we currently have. They are not ably addressing sexual reproductive health and rights as is right now, in terms of centering the autonomy of the people who are actually practicing or exercising their sexuality, but also in terms of not recognizing the different areas of sexual and reproductive health and rights that we have. I already talked about sexuality education and the fact that the country is even struggling to roll out a policy that allows for sexuality education countrywide. I dealt with the issue of access to safe abortion, which again as a country we continue to struggle with, where we say, okay, our constitution says somehow we can allow for abortion to save the life of a mother, but then we don't want to define what does it mean to save a life of a pregnant woman. We don't want to delve into some of those uncomfortable positions, or even reinforcing the fact that post-abortion care should be mandated and provided for within our health facilities. But then, other than the laws and policies that are not enabling, we also have an issue with the collection of data. Most of our data is outdated. You saw the presentation of our person, the person who delivered the keynote, and his data is in 2016. We don't have current data to support some of the arguments that we are able to put forth. But even that data within that itself is not segregated in such a way that it allows for programming around certain issues, like the issues of sexual minorities. We know in Uganda, every time you say LGBT, people want to beat you, stone you, throw you in jail. But have we even bothered to count the numbers that we have in the country? Have we bothered to know the categories? Have we bothered to assess their needs? So that if we say they don't exist, then we say even our statistics show that indeed they do not exist. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was the lack of linkage between information and provision of services. Somehow we are key. When they do studies around access to contraception, they'll show you that over 99% of women know about contraception. But when it comes to uptake and use, the numbers drastically reduce to about 44%. So if women know about contraception, why aren't they using it? Some of these issues are to do with stock out, the quality, the availability, and the access. So again, it's one thing to give people information. Again, it goes down to adolescents. We love teaching them, bringing them in a room. Please abstain, use a condom, what. But now, you haven't considered that in order to get a condom, a young person has to go to a supermarket and probably at the very least pay 2,000 shillings to get a pack. Where are they going to get that 2,000 shillings from? So closing the gap between information and access to services has become very, very key and critical.
Thank you so much, Rose Wajikona. This is very It is very, very strong. Dr. Mutumba, I don't want to be in your position as government, but we equally have to speak, Doctor. They could pass the mic to you. I want to understand, Dr. Mutumba, you as a principal medical officer, especially from the reproductive and the infant health division in the ministry, what is the Ministry of Health doing to address the barriers Rose has alluded to?
Yeah, so thank you very much, and to those who are viewing this conversation. Yeah, and directly I'll get to answer the question. The keynote speaker and my previous colleagues have already alluded to the barriers that currently hinder uptake of sexual reproductive health services. But from the various assessments undertaken, particularly I think for the young people, the biggest barrier that came out through these a number of assessments speaks to a gap in actually access to information, education and communication. And of course we have two groups of these young people, and particularly those who live in the urban, but also we have those who live in the rural areas. And for as much as the urban girl or boy has much more access to this information on their sexuality, there is that rural girl or the boy that these reports indicate gaps in access to this information. And the Ministry of Health is working very strongly on ensuring that we increase avenues to ensure that information on sexual reproductive health gets out to these, and not only to the young girls or the young boys, but also to the men and women. And this really actually contributes to close to 80% of the gap. And so there is a lot of investment, again with support from partners, and we continue to call upon the leaders, right from the members of parliament, the leadership at all levels to take lead, the leaders to really take lead in ensuring that they foster, they pass on this information. And as a ministry, we are currently working on developing specific information packages for members of parliament, for the district leaders, the religious leaders, the cultural leaders, to ensure that they are, like Reverend Nathan mentioned, you cannot pass on information that you do not have. So a lot of what is happening, again working together with the different ministries, Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Gender, which is sometimes called the Ministry of Everyone, and partners, to ensure that the leadership, both political, cultural and religious, first of all have access to this information, understand and appreciate the rationale and what is really contained in these packages, and thereafter they will be able to really disseminate. And I begin from leadership because we would really want the different layers of leadership to appreciate that this is an issue we are grappling with as a country. And most importantly, this is the issue of the teenage pregnancy, for example, is not an issue of the Ministry of Health, but it's an issue, it's a national issue, it's an issue for everyone. So each one of us, even in this room, should be able to see how they contribute to addressing this issue. So this is an issue of everyone, but I just wanted to begin by mentioning that much of the focus is really to ensure that the health promotion, education and communication department at the Ministry of Health, working closely with the reproductive and child health department, but also the community health department, the focus is really community and calling upon the different leaders who really influence behavior to ensure that they understand. You can be shocked, to in one of the engagements we have, that even at a level of a district chairperson, and I can mention this, it can be unfortunate that a district chairperson can actually describe family planning as a Muzungu concept. That would imply that, the entire district council cannot really effectively discuss issues related to family planning and therefore in such a district you'll probably not achieve much, especially when it comes to appropriation. Sometimes we come, yes, to the members of parliament to, increase allocation, but even in the district councils, if the layers that do implement do not appreciate that family planning is actually a pillar of safe motherhood, they will not appropriate at the district level. I normally tell people that it is only a woman who has conceived, who has become pregnant, that will ever become a statistic of maternal mortality, the figures that were being shown up. So women, as a country, we agree, women should conceive by choice. Women should actually conceive by choice, not really by what? By chance. And you'll agree with me that it's usually the women who conceive by chance that end up attempting to, terminate the pregnancies. So if every woman in Uganda, conceives by choice and not by chance, we will actually we will not end up into discussions of abortion. Should we terminate? Should we not terminate?
Yeah.
Because at that point, the likelihood of women terminating pregnancies that were conceived as a result out of choice will be very significantly low. That's number one.
Doctor, before you proceed, you've said that government is doing all it can to address the issue of the information gap. Let's talk about the data. Rose there alluded to the fact that our data doesn't seem to be in sync. Minister of Education has its data, Minister of Health has its data, and even when we're making reports and analysis and research like Dr. Musana, it takes time to actually have, grounded data upon which you can do, good programming that can address the ideological war you, the government, are fighting. Do we have a harmonization center of the data as ministries?
Yeah, so what's currently happening is we are currently developing a community health strategy that is largely focused on ensuring that there is harmony, and also to see that interoperability of the various data sources that we have. That is something that is currently happening, and we really just want to harmonize. It is true that the different ministries might at some point actually share different figures in terms of data, but the Ministry of Health, we've been having some gaps, especially in the community info systems, but this is something that is currently being worked on. And I think in the near future, we should be able to have a more robust community health information system. The second thing that is the Ministry of Health is currently working on is the issue of addressing, you cannot talk about SRH service delivery without looking at the people who are providing, the health workers. So currently, there is an ongoing restructuring to ensure that we enhance the existing staffing norms. The population of Uganda has really over time more than tripled, and this is something that has been largely initially focused at the regional referral hospital, but we hope by the end of this financial year we'll have the revised staffing, the revised structure that will probably see more health workers come in to address issues of reproductive, maternal, newborn, child and adolescent health, in addition to other health care services. And for now, the major focus really has been around the critical cadres. Every health worker is very important, but there are cadres that are more critical. Talk about, the anesthesia cadres, the doctors, the midwives, and the Ministry of Health has zeroed down to addressing. And again, we appreciate a number of partners who've really come in to support the Ministry of Health. Sometimes these issues are quite huge, but we appreciate that the support from the development partners coming in really. So the ministry is embracing quite a number of strategic partnerships and collaborations with different entities to also ensure that we have adequate human resources to address these issues. And in terms of we are also working to skilling, to enhance the skills of health workers. in provision of what we describe as adolescent responsive health services, that the health workers become more responsive to the needs of these young people, but also the older men and women. And so that's also currently happening. But most importantly, the use of data to understand the burden, you know, of when it comes to maternal mortality, the newborn mortality. I think the ministry has done so well, bringing this to a weekly level every Thursday for us to be able to understand as a country how many mothers and babies died in which region, which district, which health facility, to the extent of why did they die and what is it that has been done and what is it that is still persisting. I think is something that the ministry is, through the reproductive and child health department, is undertaking. And the focus on quality of care. We have really moved to ensure that the health workers put the client at the center of the intervention. This is work that is going across the country, again with support from different partners in the different regions.
I love the fact that you've said that it's work in progress. Thank you so much. I'm coming back to you. Friends, we're just joining us on NTV this great afternoon. We are discussing about the sexual reproductive health rights in these unprecedented times. And this is coming from the Coalition to Stop Maternal Mortality Due to Unsafe Abortion. Let me talk to a policymaker now here. Honorable Margaret Ayebade, who happens to be Member of Parliament from the District of Mbarara. Honorable, what is Parliament doing to address these challenges around access to sexual and reproductive health rights services?
Thank you so much. Greetings to all viewers and members who are seated here. I'm glad to be here. Sometimes when I'm talking about matters of sexual reproductive health and maternal health, I'm like, should I talk as a parliamentarian or as Margaret Ayebade myself? Because I'm so passionate about these issues. But as you've asked me, I think I'm going to talk as a member of Parliament, yes, representing the people of Mbarara District and the country at large. Looking at our theme of sexual reproductive health and rights in uncertain times, I want to say that we are really in uncertain times, where we still look at things and forget to know that times have changed. I want all of us, before anything else, to know these things are real. We pull off from thinking and imagining, and then we fall in the direction of reality. What is on ground? If there are statistics, one of this document I'm carrying is showing a lot of statistics of teenager pregnancies during lockdown. And I've already said that lockdown really unveiled so many things. The redundancy and the children being at home made us realize that maybe not, some of the children we think have not started having sex. They have been having sex outside there and even taking contraceptives behind our backs as parents, behind our backs as guardians. Now, when lockdown brought them home, they had no access. And this is the results that we got. So some of these things we have to think through. And we are like, how come when lockdown came in, we had increase in teenage pregnancies? Maybe, maybe not. Think through it. I want to go back and reply your question of what is Parliament doing. We all know the roles of parliamentarians, the budgeting, appropriation of funds, making laws and policies, then doing the oversight. I will talk from different areas first of all, looking at what government is doing in the health sector. We all know that at Health Center 3s, we have youth-friendly corners, we have family planning programs, where we find that we also have guidance and counseling. Then the issue that we still have around there is provider bias among our health workers, who provide sometimes unfriendly services to our youth. Dr. Musana hinted on provider bias, but I would also want to take it further to the curriculum of medics. How are they trained to handle these young people? To handle, for example, the key populations that we've always talked about. Is it embedded in their curriculum that when they are practicing, they remember what they studied? I think somewhere, somehow, we need some amendment around the curriculum for health workers. Ministry of Gender has put in place policy, of course through the Parliament of Uganda, which is the parenting guidance policy. This one in particular obligates parents as first awareness and support givers of our children in case of any sexual reproductive health issues. Parents are being given obligation to ensure that they continue to check on their children's behavior when they are growing and work with them in the journey of life. I think that is one of the policies through the Parliament of this country, where we hope that parents look at their children, and even when they have grown up, that they are in their, we call them young adults, where our children of 24 years, 25, they get into marriage. How do parents follow them to ensure their safety as they begin to give birth, as they begin to nurture their own children? And also children, we all know that they are custodians rather parents are custodians of children. How do parents protect their children against rape and defilement, for example? So I think the parenting guidance policy is going to do a lot for us. When we go to education, Parliament has put Ministry of Education to task to ensure that the process of national school policy is put to speed. We all have talked about that policy. The issue has been age appropriateness. Who do we tell what? At what age is a certain child supposed to be given information? But once this is put to speed, we will see how to handle. Because this policy has all the awareness and information to sexual reproductive health. This very policy has physical education in it, of which most of the doctors here recommend physical education. It should begin with our children in our school. Don't begin telling us of physical education when we are 50 years and 60. Begin exercising, begin running, begin doing this. I think if this policy is in place, children will begin right from the age where they are to know that physical education is very important.
Okay.
Sanitation and clean environment is also embedded in this policy, and especially when it comes to a girl child. This policy also has emphasis on changing rooms for girls in case a girl is at school and maybe she gets into her periods. Where does she go to change? How is the environment around her? But also in schools, we all know that we have, as government, we have senior women and senior men to talk to our children once they are in school about their sexual reproductive health, to guide them. I only echo those who are responsible to ensure that what senior women and men in schools are doing is really right.
Honorable, because of time, you're going to bear with me. I just want to know, moving forward, what commitments can Parliament make to improve the legal policy framework and the environment to have these policies run?
Oh, thank you. The legal environment, I think Parliament has done a lot. We have increased the budget for the Ministry of Justice to establish more courthouses, and I think recently, and even recruit more judges. And recently we saw President Museveni commissioning more High Court judges as a result of the increment in budget as far as Ministry of Justice is concerned. But I also wanted to say this, that I'm glad to know that Ministry of Justice has introduced what we call courthouses, where victims of rape and defilement and sexual reproductive health issues are given a chance to give or to narrate their stories in camera. I want to applaud the Ministry of Justice for doing this. We all know that it has been so hard for a woman to stand before public in a court and begin narrating how she was raped. Some of them could not stand looking at someone who raped you and then you're giving a story. But I want to say thank you to Minister of Justice to have looked at that and ensure that there is a courthouse away from public in camera, where this lady can express herself, where this young girl can express herself and say what happened.
Let's give that a round of applause. That is the right direction. And at this juncture, we're going to have the plenary because of time. TV time flies, geez. But we're there. It's coming to noon 30. The panelists are actually going to be responding to some of these. Let me request Grace to help me to have the mic that she's going to be moving around. In case we have some feedback, whoever raises your hand, you'll have roughly 3 minutes max to make a submission to this. I'll start with the lady there. You start, you give your name, and then you give your submission to this.
Hello everyone, my name is Dafa Esther. I'm a lawyer and I work with SRHR. Mine is not a question to the panelists, but I think I want to emphasize the issue of attitude, change of attitudes. It came out from the panelists' discussions that the issue is giving information, which I agree with. But I believe even if we give all the information and the right information at that to people, but when we still have negative attitudes towards reproductive health issues, then we shall never have a change. We shall go back to what the keynote speaker said, that we shall keep doing, things, expecting a change, but nothing will change. Because oftentimes people's mindset is tuned to one particular thing, and that is what they believe, that is their value, and that is it. So even if you give them information, they'll never change. I feel like we need to do attitude transformation and endeavor to ensure that as we speak with the statistics, people are empowered and notified to change and look at the reality. Because even if you give them information, we shall keep doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result, and nothing will change.
So by attitude, you mean, is it the entire and overall attitude change, mindset, direction as a country, or to a couple of people who don't seem to understand this? Because Rose there say that the powers that be don't seem to understand this conversation, or they have chosen not to understand it.
I'm actually looking at the government, the country at large, but also our personal attitudes towards particular things as individuals.
Thank you so much. There. We have Mr. Wire from Peer to Peer. who happens to be part of the coalition to stop maternal mortality due to unsafe abortion. Mr. Bwire.
Thank you very much, moderator, and good afternoon, colleagues.
Good afternoon.
Mine is a submission around the data. As partners that have done quite a lot of work around community engagement, policy influence and advocacy, we have continued to be limited by the data we have. And however much we do a lot of work around policy advocacy, we can only do too little too much, because the data that is available to influence the work that we do has been compromised. You look at what the doctor submitted earlier, 2016 data, you're looking at the UDHS data. It's still a little bit out of pace. The times we are living in are moving very fast. So as a country, we have to figure out how we move fast in terms of the data we have to influence program design, but at the same time use that same data to influence policy review and policy formulation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wire. There is another hand in the back. Let's hear from the lady before. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Loretta Oken, and I'm an individual member of CSMMUA. I have a question to the Dr. Mutumba from Ministry of Health. He mentioned skilling health workers as something that they're looking to do. And I have, from my previous experience, very recent of 2 weeks ago, we had an interaction in Gulu in one of the health centers, and the people it was kind of a community scorecard process, but we were interacting with the young people, and none of them acknowledged that they go to the health center, but they work or get information through the VHTs. So I wanted to find out, is when you say skilling of health workers, are the VHTs being considered in this, because they're the first people at the community? And we also found out that through the VHTs, they're actually not informed at all. They have very limited information about reproductive health in general, not even looking at broad things. So I wanted to find out if there's a plan for the VHTs, or when we're talking about health workers, we're just looking at the people in the facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's have that other hand, then the panelists will respond.
Thank you so much, moderator. My name is Dr. Isaac Odongo. I work for IPAS. My concern and submission will go to Ministry of Health. First of all, I would like to say that I understood everything Dr. Musan said.
You did?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the other one is that I was happy with Dr. Mutumba Robert from Ministry of Health for saying that teenage pregnancy is for everyone. Now, we all know that Ministry of Health is the one that comes up with policies and guidelines that do help providers. I want to see the stand on the standard and guidelines that were withdrawn sometime in 2015-16, which is helping health workers manage the outcomes and consequences of teenage pregnancy.
Okay. Okay, let me just have those two questions. One from, okay, Ben there, then the gentleman up front.
Thank you so much. I'm very perturbed, first of all, but thank you, Dr. Otieno, for really bringing these highlights to everyone and to the nation at large. But I want to ask you,
Ben, when you say you're perturbed, how are you perturbed?
By the statistics that were put up by the key,
yes,
not speaker.
Yes, Dr. Musa.
If we speak about 44 girls getting pregnant in an every hour, every single day, do we get goose pimples on our bodies? I'm just asking. And I want to direct this to the representative of the Parliament of Uganda here. If we can get time to speak about nyege nyege, and we avail enough time to speak about this, do your fellow policymakers understand the heft, the heaviness these teenage pregnancies are going to cause or are causing to the budget of our countries, to the health systems, to the structures in the country, and even to the lives of our young girls, because if we do not have substantive discussions that are going to come up with tangible solutions about this, and we continue, for lack of a better word, to legislate by some few people using emotions and our culture and our religious emotions in the face of our discussions, when are we going to bring out this country in this abyss it is in right now? It is really perturbing. What is the substantive stand for the policymakers to give us a substantive solution for these teenage pregnancies in terms of policy? Thank you
so much. I can feel the emotions of Ben. He's reacting the same way people are reacting that day. They said it won't happen. Let's listen to him.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Dr. Lukoma David. I'm an obstetrician, gynecologist. Now, I would want to talk from the medical point of view, and probably direct my concern to the lawyer.
Rose.
What is available at the moment, in terms of the law, is actually incriminating the seeker of the service and then also the provider of the service. So it brings up a situation whereby the provider is afraid to offer a service, and then even the girl who is needing the service fears to come to hospital because she knows when she comes, she'll be arrested. So I don't know what is being done about that kind of law, whether there's something that is coming up. It also affects the kind of data that is coming up. Because if the girl is fearing to come to the professional, where does she go to seek the service? Therefore, that information is also missed.
Thank you so much. These conversations are Ismail Savan on Twitter. Yes, your Twitter has reached me, and Sifo Uganda says setting up in hotels and discussing about those young girls does not help. You have to be on ground, meaning in the communities. Just to bring you to speed, Ismail, all who are here are coalition members and their teams are on ground. Follow them on Twitter. You'll be in position to be in sync with the conversation. Grace, we can have our microphones. I'll start off with Rose. You have 5 minutes to respond to his question. The other issue that came up, Rose, was something of the data. Given that you raised that issue, what could be the best solution to align the data issue in our country?
I'm really not a data expert, but I think we need to expand our parameters in terms of the indicators that we collect as a country in order to capture some of this information. But also in terms of also answering what Dr. Lukomo was saying, we need to create the environment between a health worker and a patient should be safe and protected under the law, so that whatever conversations are held between a health worker and a patient are protected even from external influences, because right now with the court order that confidentiality can be breached. So for me, I think those are some of the things that we need to do. In terms of the laws and policies, I think Dr. Lukomo was talking about access to safe abortion, but you know, nowadays when you say the word abortion, people want to stone you. But the biggest thing we need right now is clarity. And I was happy when Dr. Isaac raised the 2015 guidelines, because with the staying of those guidelines, health workers have no clarity on when they can provide a safe and legal abortion, because the presumption right now is that all of it is illegal. So we need those guidelines, and we need that clarity to be provided by the government. But because we are fighting an ideological war, instead of programming for people, we choose to say, oh, we are pro-life, forgetting that over 800 abortions happen every single day in this country.
Thank you. Dr. Mutumba, there was a question there for you. It was very critical about the skilling of the VHTs. Do they have adequate information while you're planning to skill up the health workers?
Yeah, thank you. I think got limited to health workers, but our healthcare system actually is hinged on the VHT, the community health workforce. And I think we've built capacity of VHTs across the entire country in provision of a wide range of family planning methods that are applicable to the community level. And I think in some areas, we have a coverage of over 80%, but of course there are some certain areas where this capacity is still being scaled up. So I must say that the approach is actually we begin with the VHTs, and if you can, in majority of the areas, we have actually VHTs capacity enhanced in a way. For example, now we are talking of DMPA, Depo-Provera, that is given subcutaneously, and we have 80% of VHTs across the country built. So the VHTs are part and parcel. They have a specific package. And even this week, I think in over 15 districts, there is ongoing capacity building for the VHTs. I also wanted to respond to a colleague who's
Dr. Ben.
Dr. Ben.
Very emotional about this.
There is a colleague who got concerned, I think, about the aspects of data.
Yes.
That you see we are in 2022 and
2016.
And the keynote speak was reflecting statistics of 2016. There is an ongoing, every 5 years we do a demographic survey, but this particular one was due in 2020. And it was actually delayed by the C-19 pandemic. This survey requires teams to touch base with the communities. You know what happened in March, April, and you know. But just to inform the team that this survey is ongoing, and we look forward to receiving this report maybe in the next couple of months. The UDHS 20, I think it will be dated 2021, results will be out, so that we can actually now tell. Much of the statistics that we have are institutional in our the DHIS2, but we look forward to receiving this most current statistics. And the last one I had was around the guidelines. You referred to guidelines on teenage pregnancies dated 2015, and I was really thinking through which particular guidelines we had withdrawn. But what I know is that we have guidelines on sexual reproductive health dated, I think, 2012 that have been undergoing review. What was withdrawn, I think, were aspects of the sexuality education framework. But we have this and the ongoing discussions around the sexual reproductive health policy. But we have guidance to health workers on provision of sexual reproductive health services, enshrined within the sharpened plan, but also other existing frameworks within the Ministry of Health. Thank you.
Do those guidelines help the health workers on who should get a safe abortion and not?
Yes, so as I think our colleague the lawyer had guided, of course, when it comes to the issues of safe abortion, we all know the position of the country and the lawmakers. And I think sometimes in such discussions that require changing the law, one thing that I've realized is that sometimes we need to escalate. Sometimes I'm part of such conversations, but you realize that there are other entities that really need to be part of the Ministry of Health, for example, is an implementing ministry, and sometimes we've also been cornered down on certain aspects that seem to be controversial. But the Ministry of Health, in some circumstances, actually does not make the law. It doesn't make the law, but it's open to ensuring that the population really receives the wide range of these services. But when it comes to termination of pregnancies, the law, I think, is still limited to circumstances where the mother's life is in danger, and I think this is a conversation that has been happening to see how we can get on board other categories, such as incest, access the termination. But that's not the work that will purely, entirely be concluded by, for example, the Ministry of Health. But again, it's the other arms of government that have to come and, have that discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mutumba. Honorable Margaret Ayebare, if Ben was close to you here, I don't know, but the reaction that happened that day when the Speaker of Parliament said that a nyege won't happen, I was in Ginger, but the people were flying, and he's wondering, if we have adequate time to discuss about Nyege as a parliament, how much time do we deliberate to discuss about pertinent issues in terms of sexual reproductive health rights in this day and age?
Thank you so much. I want to first of all say that Nyege was also a pertinent issue because
yes,
there was a presumption, and I think we were right to look at how Nyege operates, because some of the results of Nyege are unwanted pregnancies.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know whether you agree with me.
Carry on.
Some of the results, in fact, that's what we are looking at. When we are saying, is the Nyege going to be well operated? We are looking at reducing some of Dr. Musana's statistics. So, going back to see whether we have time really to talk about other pertinent issues concerning SRHR. I told you that I think you will have to have a copy of this. It was a motion moved on floor of Parliament for resolution of Parliament urging government to develop and enforce policies and strategies to protect girls against escalating cases of teenage pregnancy on the floor of Parliament. And one of the things that this mover highlighted on was looking at different, number of international conventions that Uganda has ratified to that aims at protecting women and girls against human rights abuse. So I want to say that we have time really to talk about pertinent issues at the floor of Parliament. But I want to end with this. When it comes to implementation of some of the policies and the laws that are done by members of Parliament, it bounces back to you and me. Because implementation is not part of Parliament's work. It is your work as NGOs. It is the work of Minister of Health. He has already said that Minister of Health's work is implementation. And I'm glad I'm on a health committee of Parliament. Sometimes we meet, and he knows we have met several times, and we are like, why is this not being implemented as it was put in a policy? Let's work together to end this.
Thank you so much. I want to go now to Reverend Nathan Mugalu. Someone on Twitter says that you created youth-friendly corners for guidance and counseling, but there is provider bias towards the youth. Are medics properly trained to handle the young people seeking SRHR? Is it embedded in their curriculum? I think that is the question a youth is asking on the other side, that we have youth-friendly corners, but you find someone who appears to be more like your father, and when you come to ask information about this reproductive health and rights information, they're like, what are you going to use it for? Why do you need it? As someone who is at the forefront of that and in the religious frameworks, how do we fix that?
Well, the national curriculum of adolescent health, the national curriculum on youth-friendly services, it is very clear. I was part of the team that developed that curriculum the year 2014-2015, and also went around the country training. Adolescent-friendly services do not only target services, but they target the provider, they target integration of service delivery, they target rights, and all other aspects. So that could be an issue, yes, of individuals, but since we have the Minister of Health here, I believe some of us, the then young people who participate in the development of these guidelines and the curriculum, should be able now to come back on board to go around the country correcting some of these biases. Yes, so it's true there are biases, but we are work is in progress to change attitude and mindset.
Okay. Thank you so much to the friends who are online and watching on NTV. Your feedback has reached me here, but some of you, the that is here. Brian Tamale says, no matter how much you support and push the girl child, as long as the boy child is left out, it will only widen the difference you claim to bridge. It's where we naturalists, people who believe in the natural agenda, say let's nature take its course. And he goes ahead and says that as you're uplifting the girl child, kindly put the same efforts to the boy child because he's the depositor. Since it was at university, girls were given additional points, which is still even happening today. Is it simply because, the language here went a little bit south. But while we're finalizing this conversation, let me hear your parting shots, Rosie, and where do we go from here?
Thank you so much. I want to start from that comment, and partly I agree because we have feminized sexual reproductive health and rights too much. Even in the interpretation of statistics, we interpret them in the voice of the girl child, barely in the voice of the boy child. And even when we are talking about engaging men, it's as if they are on the peripheries, but they are not central to the decisions that are being made. So that's one of my recommendations, that we need to stop feminizing sexual reproductive health and rights. The second one is I think Uganda needs to take itself away from the ideological wars that are going on in the world, because now we are at the forefront of promoting culture and religious values, and yes, to the detriment of our own people. So we need to stop involving our country in ideological wars and get back to programming according to statistics and according to the realities that we have on ground. But we also need to urgently address access to sexual and reproductive health services for teenagers by invoking and incorporating concepts like evolving capacities of minors, providing for the age of consent to medical services without requiring a parent or guardian, and concretely look at some of these issues, taking away sex from only the ambit of marriage, but recognizing that as a country, a lot of people have sex outside marriage and they also deserve to be catered for. We also need to prioritize the rolling out and implementation of the National Sexuality Education Framework. It was launched in 2018, but up to now, I don't know how many people are actually benefiting from it. And I think the last thing I'll go away with, or that I want to leave people with, is that we are moving as a country away from centering human rights, and we are now centering cultural and religious views. And we are making human rights subject to that. And this is something that we need to critically look at. Because when we decenter human rights, it means we are taking ourselves away from the international instruments that we have signed on to. And is that the direction we want to take as a country?
Thank you, Rose. Reverend Nathan, you have 3 minutes to wrap it up. Parting shots.
Yes, number one, when we say that 1,000 girls are getting pregnant every day, we should stop seeing this as statistics. For us in the social work world, we do not consider statistics, we consider individuals. So just imagine parading 1,000 pregnant girls every day. Maybe today we parade in Nambole, tomorrow we parade in the other playfield, today we parade them there. It is the day we stop seeing teenage pregnancies and maternal deaths as just mere statistic and put it in the context of human beings and persons and the impact on family and life, is the day we're going to deal with all the myths and misconceptions around our reproductive health, is the day we are going to stop actually hiding our heads in the sand and not paying attention to the very hard realities that our people are going through. That's number one. Number two, the issue of male involvement. We are here as champions of male involvement and boy mentorship. By boys and men doing what they did during the COVID-19 lockdown, they demonstrated to us who they are, that they are very dangerous and can speak that language. Therefore, it is a deliberate action on us to involve men and boys in maternal health, Like, for instance, like men and boys escorting and accompanying their wives for all the 4+ antenatal visits. We have that policy of male involvement in maternal health already. Yeah. We passed it in 2014. We launched it in NTV 2014. So male involvement is very key, and please support us as we do male involvement. Lastly, communication. Uninformed generation will make informed decisions, which will lead to prosperity of that generation. Less that, the vicious cycle of teenage pregnancies, the vicious cycle of maternal deaths is going to end up in each and every one of us families, and each family will test what we call the vicious cycle of negligence. When girls are getting pregnant and women dying. Thank you.
Mr. Dr. Mutumba, government, where do we go from here?
Yeah, thank you so much. And for me, one, let each one of us identify their role. Okay. My role. One speaker mentioned that for you to change the world, sometimes it's better to first change yourself. So let's really focus initially on the things that we can do, the things that I can do to make a contribution to see this reduction. Sometimes issues around changing laws have come to believe that they are a process that definitely could take years and years. But as we undertake such efforts, I think from a quality improvement approach, let's focus within our space, within our mandate. What is it that we can do to make things, change? That's one. Number two, let's work together. Let's work together. A multi-sectoral approaches, the state and the non-state, the cultural, the religious, and I'm really glad that we are working together. Maybe I should be saying let's work more, together. I think together we'll be able to see the changes. And the last thing is let's continue to have such conversations to identify what we can do different to see this desired impact or outcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Honorable, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to say something about data. As we also make laws and policies in Parliament, we need data. Sometimes you find you have no data to stick to back your argument on the floor of Parliament. So as you're outside there and you're giving us these statistics, we need to have data to back our policy making as members of Parliament. Secondly, I want to talk about what my sister, the other council, talked about, the attitude change. Even if we appropriate funds and budget for different activities and programs, if our people do not have change of the attitude, the mindset change of how things were, how they are, and how they are likely to be, we are going to come here and talk and speak, but things will never change. Lastly, change begins with you and me, as Dr. Mutumba has just said. What are you doing in your particular place? As a member of Parliament, yes, I'm a member of Parliament, but I have the individuality when it comes to me as Maggie, as Margaret. What do I see? What do I support? How do I look at things before I go to Parliament to be a parliamentarian? How about my own role as a parent, my own role as a family member, my own role as a community member, where each one of us is staying? As a church leader, what are you doing in your church? As a medical doctor, what are you doing? Where are you working? Are you receiving these children, the girls and the boys who are seeking family planning with a kind heart, and maybe try to ask as an individual why this girl could be looking for these pills before you begin, judging this girl? There is a reason. Maybe she's looking for PEP. She slept with someone she did not know of the HIV status last night, and you're saying, why did you sleep with her? She is going to add on Dr. Musana's statistics of new infections tomorrow.
Yeah.
Instead of talking to her, understanding her, and giving her the PEP to stop the HIV, and maybe later try to find out how she can stop going out with someone she does not understand.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much. Let's clap for my panelists. Thank you. Well done. And to all those who have been following this conversation online, we really want to thank you. This conversation is a coalition to stop maternal mortality due to unsafe abortions. And with us today in here, we had the Ministry of Health, we had SRHR, we had peer-to-peer, we had the Salvation Family Foundation, we had the Foundation of Male Engagement, Women's Link Worldwide, we had HEPS Uganda, IPAS and AGA and other participants and contributed to this conversation. Friend, countrymen, my biggest urge to you, we need to have this conversation. To the powers that be, we cannot embrace the post-abortion care, yet we can't embrace the real safe abortion conversation. I'm Andrew Chamagidon. Have a lovely afternoon. So I am now off air. Let's